Part 2. Understanding Munachi's psychological pain and her journey as she endeavored to endure. Imagine her feeling less than, overwhelmed by emotional exhaustion over these past months. Her psychological pain was more than dejection. It was a complex and deep internal struggle. She felt alone and lost in this dark world she had never imagined living. She felt exhausted thinking of an alternative to free herself, but it was to no avail. Her gaze was vacant, as if lost in reverie. The tapestry of pain and resentment she felt for many years ago rendered her empty. She lamented the adversities and the disregard for her welfare as both a youth and an individual. Although her father appeared indifferent, she doubted he would have permitted her to depart if he had been aware that the relative intended to traffic his child. She acknowledged the possibility that her assumption might also be wrong. That evening, she retired to bed, irritating those in the house with her screams throughout the night. They intervened, awakening her and inquiring about her distress. She explained that she had experienced a nightmare involving the man who had previously violated her. Instead of demonstrating understanding, they remarked that her restless, jittery behavior was annoying and unacceptable. They commanded her to curb her juvenile conduct, as she was no longer a child, but a woman. She gazed at them. Her body trembled like volcanic activity. Her thoughts were intense and volatile. However, after reconsidering whether to reveal her feelings and experiences, she hesitated briefly and nodded, her eyes teary. She cupped her face as the warmth of her tears dampened her palm. Her body trembled violently. She sat in bed, hugging her legs in contemplation of what would become of her. Munachi navigated each day with a heavy heart, the burden of unspoken words and unexpressed feelings forming an invisible wall around her, isolating her from everyone. She struggled daily, yet within this struggle lay a flicker of hope, a yearning for connection. But there was none, pushing herself to seek solace in small moments, like the warmth of a smile or the comfort of a shared glance. Amidst the shadows of her thoughts, at times, a smile or the fleeting joy of a child stirred emotions within her broken soul. A simple scene of an older couple sitting on a bench, holding hands, lost in shared memories and laughter, gripped her heart, moved her to tears, and ignited a bittersweet mixture of admiration and yearning for a precious connection like theirs. Munachi sat up, paused for a moment, letting the couple's joy seep into her, thinking that was as close as she would get to happiness. Each chuckle shared between the two resonated within her, stirring emotions she often kept at bay. She closed her eyes briefly, envisioning herself as part of their laughter, a vivid picture that felt tantalizing and distant. "One day," she whispered to herself, "I will brave the fear that hold me back." She imagined taking a renewed determination, straightening her back, and continuing to walk in the world like every human being. Each step would be a quiet promise to push herself to be stronger. She smiled. The warmth spreading through her chest made her wish she were one of them. During the same time, she became aware that the individual who assaulted her in the hotel parking lot was, in fact, the manager and employer of the driver who transported her there. Munachi's father and Liam extinguished the flames of love and affection in her heart, along with her will to live. Her father adopted his wife's daughter as his own. His wife, in turn, perceived Munachi as an intruder within their tightly knit family unit, and she is now enduring the repercussions. Liam regarded her as one of his numerous girlfriends. She did not accept this perception and did not let it go. Her child was a persistent reminder of the man who impregnated her, and another proof of life's cruelty. She wondered why she didn't perish at the time giving birth to the child, while it survived. Munachi awoke in the middle of the night to the sound of her father's voice, a nightmare reverberating in her mind. She sat on the bed, grasping her head and gently rocking her body back and forth. An unsettling sensation gripped her heart. Her father's venomous words echoed incessantly within her mind. She was irrevocably harmed owing to her father's actions, which could contribute to her potential failure, death, or descent into madness. She desired to die rather than lose her sanity. The emotional abuse inflicted upon her was more profound than any physical abuse she sustained, resulting in an intense, multifarious, and enduring psychological impact. Suffering silently damaged her. She became emotionally hollowed and was estranged from all who were in the family circle. All she felt was pain and resentment. The relative consistently sought to exploit her young life, but she was opposed to it. She didn't externalize her feelings anymore, but had multiple nightmares due to her distressing experiences. One day, a tall and robust man, colloquially referred to as Big Man, inquired, "You have brought this young girl. When do you intend to bring yours?" They were filled with intense excitement. Their emotions boiled over, and they expressed them vehemently. Munachi was taken aback. She recalled the child in question. Munachi expressed a desire to hold her. The child was approximately 6 or 7 months old. It was suggested that Munachi was too young and might accidentally drop the baby. Nonetheless, she was able to hold the infant and could have provided care if required. Munachi, despite being older than the child, was legally regarded as a minor. Although she had a child, she remained a minor in need of care, attention, and guidance from parents or a compassionate individual. However, she was deprived of comprehensive guidance. She often found herself overwhelmed by inquiries and hypotheses, contemplating how her parents, who had opted to sever their relationships in pursuit of a simpler, more fulfilling life, had not considered the well-being of their children, Munachi and Amanda, who inherited their genetic bond. Despite Munachi's physical separation, her father's wish occupied her thoughts to such a degree that she frequently contemplated death as a form of relief from the substantial burden she carried. Her memory retained his exclamation, "I wish you were the one who died instead of your sister." His brutality and disregard for her well-being had forfeited his right to be called father. He betrayed her and the love they once shared before and after her grandmother's death. She acknowledged that her father had disowned her, experienced self-pity, and wished that she had been stillborn or had died like her sisters. She envied their tranquility. Some individuals, perhaps, could have endeavored to succeed in life despite facing various challenges. Munachi, however, was too young and distressed to contemplate the future. Instead, she concentrated on thoughts of death. As she matured, she increasingly harbored sentiments of worthlessness, unloved, deplorable, and wretched. Her thoughts were beyond her control. She was a pitiable young girl living moment by moment, awaiting death to be like her 3 siblings. However, for how long could she bear this suffering while waiting for her turn? Frequently, she was in such a state of helplessness and hopelessness that she looked forward to death every day. Should death come, she would accept it with serenity and surrender to sleep, thus evading further suffering. Regrettably, death remained elusive to her, as if she were deemed unworthy of it. She reflected upon the length of her ongoing despair. Perhaps a divine purpose was designated for her. A few days later, she was given a pair of sky blue pants to wear. As it happened, the pants were too tight around her waist. She said they were too constrictive. They didn't look at her, but urged her to wear them to see a movie with a gentleman. The tightness of the pants made breathing uncomfortable. Later that night, she awoke with severe abdominal pain and went to the bathroom, where she observed and endured the situation. She stayed in the bathroom for several hours. Just before dawn, she experienced a miscarriage, which she regarded as a blessing. Munachi, who is characterized as having bedroom eyes, visited a nearby barbershop to discourage flirtatious glances. During her visit, she encountered a gentleman she identified as Boaz, who was probably in his late 40s, judging by his dyed hair. He inquired about her motivation for shaving her hair. She responded that it was merely hair that would eventually regrow. He was already aware of her situation because she had become a focal point, a recently available commodity. She turned into a topic of discussion for many. She smiled as tears streamed down her face. He mentioned he had heard that she was related to so-and-so. She nodded, and subsequently they engaged in a profound conversation. Afterwards, they communicated daily. Boaz showed an interest in learning about her and asked questions. She revealed that she had a child but chose to maintain her privacy in specific areas. The relative requested that Munachi work daily. However, she tacitly declined. Despite constant pressure to adhere to their instructions, she waited until they left the house, then packed her limited belongings and moved to Boaz's residence. He was a single man, She elucidated, with remorse, the reasons for her departure. She was cast into the ocean without a life jacket. The waves were relentless and tumultuous, too tumultuous to endure. Therefore, she was compelled to swim beneath the waves to evade being carried away. Boaz graciously received her with open arms. Although he was older, he refrained from smoking or consuming alcoholic beverages. At least, should she choose to commit herself, it would be to a single man, irrespective of his age. These circumstances evoked anger in her. Boaz observed and told Munachi that some men would pursue women aged 25 and boast about it. Munachi had not yet reached the age of 18. He regarded himself as fortunate to have her, and planned to care for her diligently. Regrettably, there was no one to articulate the nature of their relationship. The individual responsible for her protection was promoting her as youthful and attractive. However, they remained unaware that she was suffering intensely and had thoughts of self-harm. A few days later, the relative ascertained Munachi's whereabouts. Despite their involvement in trafficking her, they sought reimbursement for all expenses incurred. Boaz promptly and without hesitation paid the stated sum. He believed that she had now been acquired and remunerated. He exercised authority over her or regarded her as his property. Regrettably, in contrast to the biblical Boaz, he appeared amicable and composed in public. However, in private, he was actually contentious, overbearing, malevolent, and irritable. He stated that he had not introduced her to anyone. Therefore, she was advised to refrain from social interactions, as non-compliance could lead to adverse outcomes. When she visited the market, he specified a strict timeframe for her return. Arriving 5 or 10 minutes late would result in adverse consequences. The initial incident of physical assault left her in a state of shock. She neither sought to defend herself nor to retreat, instead allowing him to fulfill his intentions. The oppression persisted relentlessly, leaving Munachi frustrated and angry. Her life was a tumultuous journey. On a specific day, he assaulted her because she was engaging in conversation with a lady she had met at the store. However, she did not retaliate and endured the incident. Munachi went to a local bodega. Boaz followed her, but she didn't notice him. She was talking to the cashier while examining her purchases. He returned home and crossed his legs, waiting for her. He was extremely distressed when she entered. His expression resembled that of a formidable creature. He did not inquire further, but instead began to physically assault her, resulting in a black eye and a fractured lower lip from his blows. Subsequently, he opened the door and rapidly departed the residence in a state of agitation. How long would she endure these painful blows and emotional trauma? Why was living in this world so hard for her? She suffered anxiety, depression, deep-seated anger, and insomnia. She looked okay physically and was wrecked emotionally. Munachi faced an impossibility of survival. He habitually inflicted harm upon her, albeit less severely. Presently, she bore lacerations and was bleeding. Rather than seeking medical assistance at an emergency facility, she searched the bathroom for an emergency kit. No such supplies were available. She resolved to visit the convenience store to acquire Band-Aids, hydrogen peroxide, antiseptic wipes, and a bottle of analgesic. She arrived at the convenience store blood-stained. A laceration was present near her left temple close to her eyebrows, and her eye was swollen shut. She was on the verge of collapsing when an individual inquired whether she was unwell. She nodded. The cashier looked at her with evident pain on his face, but he remained silent. He provided her with a cooling pad for her eye and stated it was complimentary. She declined. He recommended that she seek emergency medical attention at the ER. Instead, she took what she paid for and went to the house to care for herself. Munachi was physically exhausted, spiritually drained, and emotionally unresponsive. She perceived herself as without sanctuary and longed for tranquility, whether in life or death. On occasion, she felt a desire to retreat underground and live like a hobbit, where she could remain unnoticed and undisturbed, thereby enjoying a life free from harassment. She was exhausted from living without the hope of becoming the person God had intended her to be, a resilient, composed, and generous person, rather than the shell she had transformed into. Several days later, she returned to the bodega wearing eyeglasses, almost unrecognizable. She had a lacerated lip this time. The laceration from her left temple reopened, and she had a tear inside her left eye as if someone had attempted to pry her eye out. Blood was red and congealed within the eye. Upon observing her, the cashier was immediately alarmed by her appearance. He nodded politely and introduced himself as Elliot. As he reached for the phone, he inquired about what had occurred to her. She explained that she had experienced a minor domestic accident but was unharmed. An elder woman stood behind her, frowned, and nodded silently. Perhaps she believed that women who had been abused frequently fabricated accident stories to divert attention from the truth. Elliot expressed significant concern regarding her safety, contemplating the possibility that her abuser might, at some point, inflict serious harm or even result in her death. He tentatively articulated this apprehension, stating, "This was not a relationship she should remain in. It could culminate in tragedy." Munachi maintained a silent smile. However, her options appeared limited. This seemed to be her destiny. From where could her rescuer be expected to arrive? Only death might potentially save her, yet it would not manifest unless she demonstrated her worthiness of its regard. Elliot dialed 911, but Munachi escaped, leaving them in shock. The relative had left to be with her family. Boaz persisted in inflicting harm upon her. The severity of the assault intensified with each occurrence. Munachi became progressively more frustrated and resentful. Life subjected her to numerous painful experiences, which accumulated into a substantial reservoir of anger. The individual responsible for her continuous suffering undeniably obtained great delight in it: the devil. She suffered emotional burnout due to insomnia. But as always, she was at the mercy of God, waiting for his benevolence. The child she left behind was about 2 years of age at this time. Whenever she called to hear her son's voice, she was informed that he was either eating or sleeping. She repeatedly attempted to contact them, explicitly requesting to speak with her son and asserting that her primary objective was to communicate with her child. Nevertheless, each time, they courteously offered explanations, only to deny her access to her son. Following multiple attempts, they ultimately conveyed to her that the child was fragile, and engaging in conversation with him could potentially unsettle him. They recommended that she refrain from making further calls to avoid causing any disturbance. Additionally, they stated that they had adopted him. The line fell silent. She intended to externalize her feelings in retrospect, but failed when she endeavored. She was unaware of which family member had adopted her son, nor who had given them the authority to do so. This represented the greatest betrayals concerning her already fragile state. Family members had fulfilled their roles impeccably. Munachi was astounded to discover her son's adoption, which subsequently contributed to her clinical depression. This time, she would never forgive them for that. Her thoughts traversed a multitude of directions. Her mother, her grandmother, Amanda, her father, Liam, the father of her child, her family members, and Boaz. At this juncture, she lacked the inclination to engage with any of them. She mourned to the extent of illness, with red, swollen eyes, cough, sore throat, fever, and headaches. Months later, hoping they might reconsider, she made several follow-up calls. However, the calls went unanswered. After numerous efforts, she ceased her calls and confronted the risk of losing her sanity. Fortunately, she began praying, seeking divine assistance to aid her in forgetting the life she left behind, especially her child, and to help her cross the ocean she was traversing. At that juncture, she sought liberation, freedom from Boaz, emancipation from the life of torment that fate had inflicted upon her, and relief from reminiscing. Attempting to numb her mind and heart to all aspects of life proved futile. She would frequently find herself crying when she wished to smile, watching comedies only to end in tears. Tears would well up in her eyes and stream down her face when she looked at a child. The suffering's too much for a human being to endure. She kept praying for alleviation. Munachi suffered great distress from the absence of her son. Her longing was an ongoing pain. Her psychological well-being was compromised, as she was compelled to suppress the truth, ignore her child, and forget the hours she labored to bring her son into the world, as well as the first time the nurse placed her son on her chest. She was forced to ignore the months she had spent loving her son, and now they wanted to separate them. Compelled to renounce motherhood, compelled to refrain from contacting him, and compelled to sever any connection with him. Additionally, she was compelled to eradicate the love that consumed her for her child. If you empathize with Munachi's narrative, kindly like, share, and subscribe. Your support will help develop our channel. Thank you. Munachi endured considerable distress and vividly remembered her urgent appeal to her son's paternal cousin for financial assistance to obtain essentials for her son, following her aunt's refusal to offer aid, as her aunt had advised. Furthermore, Munachi's father didn't take any action to support her, having not offered assistance since his marriage. Following denial of her right to communicate with her child, she reached the nadir of her patience. Anger and frustration intensified within her. She was exhausted from the situation, yet she silently mourned the relationship that might have been possible with her son. She prayed for the pain to diminish. Her thoughts remained unwavering, and the light within her heart gradually dimmed. She remembered the words that immobilized, coiled her in a corner, and then broke her. The weight of her father's abandonment and the relatives' betrayal subdued and shattered her quietly, so she sheltered herself. Deeply distressed, she experienced feelings of revulsion and unease. She found herself unable to identify a definitive course of action within the situation or in life in general. Munachi perceived their deception as myrrh intertwined with gall, yet she didn't express grievances. It could have been advisable for her to contemplate this course of action, considering the connotation of her name. She should seek solace in her faith rather than harbor resentment towards others. Boaz did not contribute to her welfare. He frequently harmed her at his discretion. Although he provided her with the necessities, her primary desire was for someone to listen to her and to care for her mental well-being. Through life's experiences, she learned to trust no one until the individual demonstrated their trustworthiness. The silence and the suppressed pain were overwhelming her. She sought to articulate her feelings through writing. As the emotions were too intense, she found it difficult to control her mindset. She required an escape and resorted to purchasing a bottle of wine and a pack of cigarettes. Boaz was present at the residence when she entered. He cast an analytical look in her direction. She disregarded his scrutiny, left the premises, and began smoking and consuming alcohol outdoors as a form of solace. He followed her, stood before her, observed her with disdain while nodding, and remarked, "That is what you have become." They perceived that nothing beneficial would result from you. Therefore, you were sold. At this moment, she was indifferent to the repercussions of her defiant conduct. She replied, "Yes, thanks to life's intense rage and everyone, including you, led me to this. Your abuses are insignificant compared to my experiences. Come on. Keep pounding on me with your words." She was indifferent to his words or actions directed at her. He merely nodded in response. She continued smoking and quickly became a chain smoker. Following her cigarette consumption, she proceeded to explore other substances. She believed that whiskey might alleviate her suffering. However, nothing mitigated her agony. She did not experience hatred. Rather, she felt profound bitterness and resentment towards her abusers and herself for being weak. All circumstances had deteriorated. Anxiety had become an integral part of her life. The wound she sustained was too severe to be properly cared for. The sole recourse was palliative surgery, which she underwent without anesthesia. The procedure was arduous. She endured considerable suffering. They instructed her to feign amnesia, following directives to ignore her child's existence. When Munachi was pregnant, her father expressed a preference that she had been deceased rather than her sister. Now they had adopted the same child, and he was to be forgotten by her. Whenever the memory of her son arose, she tearfully beseeched God to grant her absent-mindedness instead of retentive memories of her child and her entire clan. Tears streamed down her face. She wept until illness overtook her. Chills, cough, and fever. She was in a state of distress. Munachi prayed for a miracle. It didn't manifest immediately, however. Over time, the memories gradually faded. For several months, she mourned the loss of her relationship with her father, her child, family members, and relatives. She established a formidable barrier surrounding herself, exceeding the thickness of the Great Wall of China. Although it required significant effort on her part to exclude everyone from her life, she expressed a desire to automate the process. Loneliness transformed into her fortress. She harbored an unwavering disdain for her past life. Nevertheless, divine intervention could potentially alleviate her suffering. It took several years for her intense emotional pain related to her son to diminish significantly. Although she had a son, it appeared as though the child no longer existed in her perception. Her thoughts and feelings experienced a considerable transformation. It appeared as though her heart had become emotionally insensible, like a stone. She ceased to care or feel, functioning merely as a robot, programmed solely to perform tasks and move about without emotions. Due to Boaz's continual assaults, Elliot's compassionate nature prompted him to attend to Munachi's injuries on numerous occasions. Consequently, they fostered a friendship. Boaz perceived their relationship as unacceptable. One day, he observed them conversing, but Munachi no longer regarded him with fear because she was indifferent to the prospect of his causing her death during the act of assault. Her primary desire was to terminate her suffering. She trusted and was convinced that he would and could do so because she perceived him as a monster. He observed them from a distance, subsequently approached, and informed her that her presence was required at home. Elliot's conduct was antithetical to Boaz's. Elliot responded immediately, "Do not lay a finger on her or else." This was not a hollow threat. Boaz experienced emotional distress owing to Elliot's proximity to Munachi's age, attractiveness, and considerate demeanor. It is plausible that Boaz perceived himself as unable to compete. He feared the potential loss of the young woman he professed to love, yet was often viewed as a punching bag he owned. Upon returning home, instead of resorting to physical violence, he issued an apology and committed to never assaulting her again. Within 24 hours, she sustained multiple injuries, including a busted lip, a black eye, a broken arm, and a cut on her chin. A 4-inch laceration on her right elbow, as a result of his forcefully pushing her onto the kitchen countertop. Her elbow came into contact with a drinking glass that he had previously placed there. Considering the gravity of the injuries he had caused, Boaz likely contemplated the promises made to her the previous day, which are now deemed null and void. He knelt to offer an apology, however the damage had already been done, and the apology was pointless. She was unmoved. Munachi remained silent. Instead, she observed the older man kneeling before an individual, perceiving their age difference as reminiscent of a father and child. She looked at him with pity, not disdain, to see a grown man kneeling before a youth. He didn't permit her to visit the emergency room. Instead, he requested his brother, a medical professional, to come to the residence to provide care for her. He put a cast on her arm and attended to her cuts. She sat with the broken arm against her chest, while tears ran down her face, reflecting on Boaz's cruelty to her. How could someone be so heartless? He endeavored to instill fear in her by telling her that he would make things really bad for her if she thought of running away. She ought to run. Munachi took a deep breath, steadying herself. The pain in her arm was overwhelming, yet it paled in comparison to the determination that surged within her. "I will not let him control me," she whispered to herself, wiping away the tears. The shadow of fear that Boaz cast over her would knot her down. The following day, she was unable to go outside. However, she reached out to Elliot to ask whether he had family members or friends who could accommodate her until she secured permanent housing. A few days subsequently, Elliot secured a bedroom apartment for her. It was modest, yet it served as her sanctuary, a refuge away from Boaz's proximity. The memories of threats flooded her thoughts, but visions of freedom swiftly replaced them. Munachi took a shaky breath, trying to steady her racing heart. The pain in her arm was like a reminder of Boaz's malice and cruelty. Each pulse echoed the truth of the situation. Yet as the tears threatened to spill over again, a flicker of defiance ignited within her. "I will no longer be your victim," she said, lowly. She left Boaz a message thanking him for his kind gesture by providing her a place to stay when she needed it most. She said that her presence was an encumbrance to his house. Therefore, she felt it was behooving to vacate his premises. to be out of his presence, to give him his space, and that she had previously made other arrangements for relocation. With every ounce of strength, she gathered her few belongings with one hand and called a Huber and flee from the cruelty and fear Boaz had imposed on her. He envisioned torturing her to death, but she envisioned a more suitable safety system in life. She put the message and his house key into an envelope and placed them on the dining room table. Thank you for watching the video. If you empathized with Munachi's narrative, please like, share, and subscribe to help us develop our channel. You will be notified for part 3 of her narrative.